makes this movie work. I think we said on the podcast before that I don't know if this concept would have worked if it wasn't Nicolas Cage. So
Hmm.
yeah, no, this movie is absolutely delightful. My next movie is another theatrical movie. It's another movie that I think it got okay critical reception, but it definitely was not a hit at the box office, and that was Stillwater. And to me, it's sort of like the way back a year ago, where with Ben Affleck, I thought you had this really good movie, but he didn't seem to be in talks for best performance. And now, a year later, his good friend Matt Damon, I think, did one of the best performances of the year, but there doesn't seem to be any talk for what he did in Stillwater. It seems like it's a movie that's already been forgotten. And I think part of it, unfortunately, was the marketing. And the marketing, that you could sort of blame the marketing department, but you could also kind of blame the director, Tom McCarthy, who I think is a great director, but he also made references to Stillwater kind of being loosely based on the Amanda Knox trial. And I think that's really unfair, and it caused controversy because of things that happened in this movie. It really is not the Amanda Knox trial, and I don't think that is fair to her and what she went through, because this movie is not about a wrongfully accused girl necessarily. It's more about the father, and it does a few things that definitely, if someone goes in this and thinks it's telling them about the Amanda Knox story, that's not fair because that's not the truth. And I think that was a misstep. And I think though it was also, we've been talking about IP. We've been talking about people not going to see movies that they don't recognize. And I think they gravitate towards the Amanda Knox thing because it's like, oh, people know about that trial. So if we reference that trial, maybe people will go see this movie. So I understand from a strategic point that they try to almost put like an adult IP on it, something recognizable. But I don't think that was fair. I don't think it was fair to the movie. I don't think it was fair to Amanda Knox. But that's not taken away from this movie for me. I think it's a really solid movie. You've got this father who is a bit of a deadbeat father. Matt Damon, he plays Bill, and he's just sort of in between jobs and having a hard time. But then his daughter, essentially in France, she gets arrested. She gets accused of murder. And so he then is sort of trying to get her free. He decides to move to France and try to sort of do his own kind of investigation, try to push for his daughter. Abigail Breslin plays the daughter, and she's Allison. Abigail Breslin, like I said, she's not in it a lot, but she does really well. What I like about this movie is you've got sort of this ugly American that first comes to the country, kind of slamming about, and then he starts attaching to France, and he finds a woman there, played by Camille Cotton. She's Virginia, and they sort of build this relationship together, and they like an intimate relationship, a romantic relationship. I think it's really sweet, and he begins to sort of appreciate France more, and you see a character arc. Bill starts softening and changing, and he failed as a father for Allison, and he gets a second chance here because Virginia has a daughter named Maya, and it's a really sweet relationship between Matt Damon and Maya. Maya, played by Lulu Slavard, which is one of the best performances I think in the movie. Another great kid performance. And I just like this idea that you get second chances and being a better person, and he then tries to fix things with his real daughter too. And I like all those aspects. So the dramatic elements and the relationships and the character arcs are really good. The weakest thing about this movie, and what's going to stop it from being kind of a best of list and made it more 3 stars rather than like the 3.5 that I thought it would get, is it then starts going into 90s thriller, and it makes some turns. And his attempt of going rogue and doing the investigation himself doesn't quite work. It would have worked if it was sort of a 90s thriller, but I feel this movie's more of a drama and a character study. And so I don't feel like the thriller aspects really work here. And there's some crazy twists, and there's stuff here that's not believable. And maybe I would have accepted it in a crazy thriller, but because this is not Till Death, because it's not that type of movie, because this is more drama, it was jarring. And so that stopped that. But don't take away from the fact that Camille Cotton, Lila Silvard, and Matt Damon have incredible performances. You believe the chemistry. You care about this new kind of family. And I think it's a great character arc. Tom McCarthy is a director that's definitely made some heavy duty stuff in the last few years. He's made movies before that made my best of. Like we're talking about the guy who's done Spotlight and stuff. And so this is someone that I think can definitely create some great pictures. Spotlight, I think, is still his best, but this is really solid too. It's worth checking out. I think it got very forgotten this year, and it's a pleasant surprise.
Tom McCarthy, while being the mind behind Spotlight, which was an amazing film, it was Spotlight came as a very like a throat lozenge almost, because the year before he had done The Cobbler, and so we needed something to help us. We needed to clear that taste from our mouths, and so Spotlight is one of those amazing situations where, I mean, if you watched The Cobbler, you would probably have ideas about who directed it. You'd probably say, I think I know the type of person, and they're never going to get past this kind of film. However, then Spotlight comes out and it shows just how good Tom McCarthy actually is. I haven't seen Stillwater. The main things I've heard are what you mentioned about how it got referred to the Amanda Knox thing, which from everything I read sounded unfair, that it really wasn't a good comparison. And yeah, it's a movie that I've wanted to try out, but it just hasn't been near sort of the top of my list of those underrated films to see. More been into Wrath of Man because it just kind of sounded cool. Stillwater, but I know that it's better than that. It's just when you're compared to Wrath of Man and Jason Statham drinking V8 energy or V8 tomato juice and popping testosterone pills and punching people, it's going to lose. It's absolutely going to lose.
Did this help, though, better the chances of you seeing it now?
Absolutely it did, yes.
I do want to reference, it is kind of crazy that Tom McCarthy may be the only director who made my best of list and worst of list in the same year.
I know, like it's absolutely insane that he went from The Cobbler, which was a horrible film, absolutely
Adam
horrible.
Sandler.
Yeah, Adam Sandler and some very respectable actors that were in it.
Did a bad movie.
Yep. And then Spotlight. It was, that was one of those cases that I absolutely loved being proven wrong, because I did think, it was impossible to watch The Cobbler and think that Tom McCarthy was much better than how that film turned out.
Before we move on, though, I need to be reminded, it was Method Man that was in Cobbler, right? The best part of the movie?
Yes. Method Man was the best part of that film. I think he was definitely trying. He brought some fun to it, but ultimately, nothing was saving The Cobbler.
Now, to be fair, he said he's trying. I will say this. I think Adam Sandler doesn't always try with sort of his scripts or like the movie he necessarily makes, but he never pulls a Bruce Willis.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. And when it's actually a good script, he really excels, which is so frustrating.
His problem is he wants to do a silly voice.
Oh, he really does. He's so bent on doing those voices. Anyways, not Adam Sandler related. This is a film about an underdog sports story. It's called Golden Arm. It is about women arm wrestlers, and it stars Mary Holland as Melanie, who has what they call a golden arm. She's maybe not the biggest person, but she can do a great job when it comes to arm wrestling. Her friend Betsy Sidaro plays Danny. Betsy Sidaro plays Danny, and she is trying to rope Melanie into competing in the national competition so that her arch rival can be defeated. And plays it just like a cliche sports film. I mean, to train Melanie, they find, this mean old woman that used to compete and was unbeatable, but now she's like, Melanie doesn't have what it takes, but then she gets proven like this film does it all. And while it is a leaning into a silly concept, it never feels at any point that anybody is acting like the concept is silly. I mean, they have entrance music. They're encouraged to have like nicknames and outfits, basically like professional wrestlers. But it's all arm wrestling, and because it doesn't necessarily play like it is silly, it just makes a fun sports film. And if you've seen enough sports films, I think there's lots in Golden Arm to really enjoy. Some great performances, some absolutely outstandingly funny moments. I was very, very happily surprised with this film.
So if you wanted to do one of the most weird and eccentric double bills, would you do Slumber Party or Massacre and Golden Arm as two movies that are aware that they're playing into the tropes of their genre?
Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. Perfect way to look at it.
Yeah, this is a movie that I heard nothing about until you mentioned it. And again, you told me that it is worth checking out, and I didn't get around to it.
This is the wrong time of year, though, for being told you need to check this out, because either you and I are basically only going to be checking out the films that could make the best of list. That's just the truth of it. Mm-hmm.
But now this has made my list of like, this is a thing that at least, I'm guessing since it's on this list, this is something I should see in January.
Yeah, I would say that you probably want to see this film once we got the lists done, because I think it'll be one of those fun movies that you'll want to champion.
And one of the cool things about you champion this movie is there's no stars in this, right?
No, there aren't. But I mean, everything is well acted. Everyone does a great job. But yeah, no big names on the marquee.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, so I now am ready to do one of my lesser known movies, except my lesser known movie here does have a star. If you're a fan of The Office, or if you're a fan of Coffee and Kareem, then you would know Ed Helms. And so this is Ed Helms starring picture, and it's called Together Together. And it's not quite a romantic comedy. It's more like a friend com, I think, or like a platonic rom. I don't know what you would call it, platonic com, platom. But anyways, so what we have is Ed Helms is a single guy in his 40s. You get the idea, he's relatively successful. He's created some apps that are popular, so that's sort of where he's made his money. They don't push him off as a millionaire, so it's kind of like mildly successful apps that have been able to allow him to have a good living, but he doesn't have anyone. He's single, and so the idea is you start off the movie realizing he wants to start a family, and so the idea of doing that is to find a surrogate who will then carry his child, and he will be a single dad who then raises his child. And so he finds this surrogate who is played by Patty Harrison, Anna, and you'll learn pretty quickly that she's got an interesting past. You sort of learn that her relationship with her family is not great, and that she actually has had a child before, but this time she was too young, and she put it up for adoption. It's not really a spoiler. She reveals that in the very first scene. So, but it kind of set that up. And so the idea that she's going to be the surrogate for him. Ed Helms is kind of very controlling, very nervous, very worried about how the baby's going to be, especially sort of with her lifestyle. And so what happens is he kind of wants to be involved in almost all aspects of her life. And at first, obviously, that's annoying for her. But then they start building a friendship. They start having this respect. And what's kind of cool about this is they don't go Woody Allen here, though they reference that. because he's in his 40s and she's in her 20s.